All that changed in 1990 when I did get sober, when I refound my old self or whatever. And it was lovely to find that little boy again. But fame is a really incredible business.
For decades, their friendship captured hearts, a pop legend and a beloved princess, bonded by compassion and tragedy. But now, Elton John has finally broken his silence on Princess Diana, revealing a truth he's kept hidden for years. This isn't another tribute or rehearsed interview. It's a raw, emotional confession that peels back the royal curtain and exposes what really happened behind the scenes. What did Diana confide in him? And why did Elton wait until now to speak? Get ready, because this truth might change everything you thought you knew. Diana's unexpected path into the palace. It didn't begin with romance or even much attention. When Diana Spencer first crossed paths with Prince Charles in 1977, she was a shy 16-year-old schoolgirl, unassuming and full of youthful innocence. The meeting happened under remarkably ordinary circumstances, yet held a strange twist. Charles was there for someone else, her older sister, Sarah. No one imagined in that moment that the quiet teenager in the background would one day become the face of the monarchy's most unforgettable era. Charles, already 29 and burdened with expectations to find a proper bride, wasn't immediately drawn in. But something about Diana, her softness, her reserved charm, lingered in his mind. Their story picked up momentum in the summer of 1980, years after that first meeting. By then, Charles had begun to see Diana not as a teenager or his ex-girlfriend's sibling, but as a serious prospect. The royal machinery began to hum. It started with a private sailing trip aboard the royal yacht Britannia, followed by a weekend invitation to Balmoral Castle, an unspoken test for anyone hoping to fit into the royal fold. Diana, nervous but determined, made an effortless impression. Even Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and Prince Philip were taken by her grace. From that moment, her path toward the crown was being quietly paved. By February 6, 1981, Charles proposed at Windsor Castle. Diana said yes, but the engagement remained a secret for more than 2 weeks. When it was finally announced to the world, headlines exploded. Here was a young woman with no noble lineage beyond her title of lady, who worked as an assistant in a nursery school, now engaged to the future King of England. The world called it a modern fairy tale. But inside the palace walls, Diana's new life was far from magical. She moved into Clarence House and then Buckingham Palace, where she began months of preparation. Surrounded by grandeur, she felt isolated. With no formal guidance and little emotional support, she wandered the corridors as a bride-to-be, unsure and lonely. Her public debut alongside Charles came in March 1981, at a charity ball where she met Princess Grace of Monaco, who, in a quiet moment, warned Diana that royal life would be far harder than it looked. Then came the wedding. On July 29, 1981, millions across the globe tuned in to watch Diana step into history. Draped in an ivory silk gown with a 25-foot train, she entered St. Paul's Cathedral before 3,500 guests and 750 million viewers. She was only 20. The world was enchanted. But even during that spectacle, signs of unease flickered. Diana nervously reversed Charles's names at the altar and pointedly omitted the vow to obey him, a symbolic break from royal tradition. Diana had become a princess, yes, but not by the usual script. She was the first English woman in centuries to marry a future king, and the first royal bride to have held a paying job. Her entrance into the monarchy wasn't just a personal milestone, it was a seismic shift. The fairy tale had begun, but beneath the tiara and tulle, deeper tensions were already quietly taking root. But what secret struggle was already unfolding behind palace walls while Diana appeared to live a royal dream? Stay glued to your screen. Diana's journey with William and Harry. Yet beneath the crown and ceremony, Diana's heart beat loudest not in grand halls or public engagements, but in quiet moments with her sons, William and Harry. Even as the world watched her grace red carpets and shake hands with dignitaries, Diana's truest joy unfolded far from the spotlight. From the moment she cradled Prince William on June 21, 1982, everything shifted. More than a princess, she was now a mother with a mission. Her love was not passive, it was radical. She challenged centuries of royal detachment by insisting on being present, involved, and fiercely protective. Behind the grandeur of Kensington Palace and the quietude of Highgrove House, Diana waged an unseen emotional battle. Not long into her first pregnancy, she endured a deeply troubling episode at Sandringham, an intentional fall down a staircase that left her bruised, but her unborn child unharmed. Later, she would admit it was a desperate cry for help. The silence around her pain was deafening, but she carried on, determined to raise her children differently. Postpartum depression followed William's birth, another shadow rarely spoken of in royal circles. Still, she refused to let protocol separate her from her child. When an official tour to Australia and New Zealand loomed, Diana stunned advisors by taking baby William along. It was an idea first encouraged by Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser, and though initially uncertain, Diana embraced it fully. The move wasn't just unconventional, it was groundbreaking. The public adored her for it. In September 1984, Prince Harry arrived. During her second pregnancy, Diana described a rare closeness with Charles, though it would not last. She kept the baby's gender to herself, knowing her husband had longed for a girl. Instead, she gave him another boy and poured into him the same unwavering devotion. To outsiders, Diana's parenting choices often seemed rebellious. She dismissed the traditional royal nanny, selected schools and clothes herself, and regularly drove her sons to class. She wanted William and Harry to experience a life beyond gilded walls, to know the thrill of a roller coaster and the lesson of empathy at a homeless shelter. She nicknamed William her little wise old man and leaned on his quiet strength, even as a child. Harry, she'd say with a fond laugh, was naughty just like me. Together, they gave her something the palace never could, a sense of purpose, untouched by politics or protocol. Through the unraveling of her marriage and the growing strain of public life, her bond with her boys only deepened. Diana once said her life revolved around them, and it did. In joy and in heartbreak, they were her constant, her cause, her calm. And that was the one part of her life where Diana never faltered: motherhood. In the years to come, her fierce, tender love for William and Harry would define not just her legacy, but theirs. But before we dive deeper into the emotional revelations surrounding Princess Diana and Elton John, let's briefly rewind to how their remarkable bond began. Keep watching. How Elton and Diana found each other in the unlikeliest ways. Long before the cameras, crowns, and concerts, two children in different parts of England were quietly learning how to carry pain. One, a girl born into aristocracy. The other, a boy from a modest home in Pinner. Both would grow up to capture the hearts of millions, but not before being shaped by silence, rejection, and longing. Elton John, born Reginald Kenneth Dwight on March 25, 1947, was a child prodigy. By age 4, he was playing piano by ear. At 11, he earned a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music. But even as he aced exams, the rigid structure didn't inspire him. He found more joy sneaking onto the London Underground, headphones on, dreaming of something beyond the notes on a page. At home, his gift was met with little warmth. His father, Stanley Dwight, a strict military man, disapproved of Elton's musical passion and was emotionally distant. His mother, Sheila, was unpredictable, sometimes supportive, often difficult. It was his grandmother, Ivy, who became his constant. Across the country, Diana Frances Spencer was born on July 1, 1961, at Park House on the Sandringham estate. On the surface, she had it all: lineage, privilege, proximity to royalty. But at just 6, she watched her parents' marriage fall apart. Her mother left, and Diana was left in a cold, formal home with her emotionally unavailable father. Her resentment toward her stepmother, Rain, grew into fury, once pushing her down the stairs. That emotional rawness would one day endear Diana to millions. Diana and Elton didn't meet until 1981 at Prince Andrew's birthday party. Elton noticed her immediately, not because of her title, but because of something else, something familiar, a quiet sadness, a bruise he recognized. By then, Elton's rise to fame had already begun. After leaving school at 17, against his father's wishes, he played in pubs, joined the band Bluesology, and eventually answered a magazine ad from lyricist Bernie Taupin. That meeting sparked one of music's greatest partnerships. Elton began writing melodies to Bernie's lyrics, eventually adopting the stage name Elton John. In the late 1960s, he became engaged to Linda Woodrow, who had supported him and Bernie. But just weeks before the wedding, Elton backed out, encouraged by friends who saw he wasn't ready. Years later, when Linda reached out for help with medical bills, Elton quietly covered them. Then, in 1984, he shocked fans by marrying German recording engineer Renate Blauel in Australia. The union quickly crumbled. On their honeymoon, Elton admitted he couldn't go through with it, and Renate later attempted to take her own life. They divorced in 1988. Elton later called her the classiest woman I ever met, but admitted he had been living a lie. Everything changed in 1993 when he met filmmaker David Furnish. Their connection was instant. On December 21, 2005, the day civil partnerships became legal in the UK, they formalized their relationship. When same-sex marriage became legal in 2014, they wed. Their two sons, Zachary and Elijah, were born via surrogate. For the first time, Elton built a family rooted in truth. Throughout his life, Elton refused to stay silent. He openly criticized institutions that fueled hate. One comment, that Jesus was a super-intelligent gay man, sparked outrage and even death threats. But like Diana, he didn't back down. Diana also turned her pain into purpose. She embraced AIDS patients when others recoiled. She walked through landmine fields and held victims of war. The child who once felt abandoned became a woman who refused to abandon others. Behind the scenes, Elton and Diana's friendship deepened. They shared laughs, secrets, and heartbreak. What the world saw, two icons laughing, crying, comforting each other, wasn't just a performance. It was real. A connection between two souls who had been hurt deeply and chose to turn that pain into something generous and lasting. Diana's silent rebellion. But beneath the royal grandeur and polished image, Diana's life inside the palace had quietly turned into a private storm she could no longer control. What began with the sparkle of a royal fairy tale in 1981 soon faded behind closed doors. As Diana and Charles discovered, they were worlds apart. She, young and emotionally open, longed for affection and understanding. He, older and restrained, was devoted more to duty than to the delicate needs of his bride. Their differences weren't just about age. They spoke entirely different emotional languages. And by the mid-1980s, their fractured bond could no longer be hidden behind practiced smiles or choreographed public appearances. The media even gave their growing detachment a nickname, the Glums. The cracks widened when Diana discovered that Charles had resumed his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. It wasn't a secret affair. It was a ghost that had never left their marriage. In 1989, Diana finally confronted Camilla at a party, her voice calm but cutting. "I know what's going on. Don't treat me like I'm stupid." That confrontation didn't end the betrayal. It only confirmed how deeply isolated she had become. At the same time, Diana was searching for her own source of comfort. She began a relationship with James Hewitt, her son's former writing instructor, someone she felt genuinely listened to her. Rumors would later swirl about Hewitt being Prince Harry's father, mostly due to their shared red hair, but Harry had been born years before the affair began. Earlier still, Diana had fallen for Barry Manicky, her former bodyguard, even dreaming of a quiet life away from royalty with him. But that hope vanished when he died in a tragic motorcycle accident, under circumstances Diana later described with suspicion and heartbreak. In 1992, the illusion shattered completely. Andrew Morton's book, Diana, Her True Story, exposed the depths of her despair, her battles with bulimia, her suicidal thoughts, and the emotional neglect she endured. Though she denied being the source at the time, it later emerged that she had secretly recorded tapes, desperate for someone to finally hear her truth. "Each time I came up for air," she confessed on those tapes, "Charles pushed me down again." That same year, scandal exploded with leaked recordings, both of Diana's private calls and the infamous Tampon Gate, between Charles and Camilla. By December, the royal couple officially separated. The Queen and Prince Philip had tried to salvage the marriage, but it was too late. Both Diana and Charles had emotionally checked out long before. What remained was a woman who had once dreamed of being cherished, now learning to stand on her own. The crown had silenced her, but no longer. From the ashes of that broken marriage, Diana began to rise, not as the princess in someone else's story, but as a woman reclaiming her voice, even if it cost her everything. But what drove Diana to risk everything by exposing the crown's deepest cracks from within? Stay tuned. The moment Diana broke the royal script. But just when the palace thought it had Diana figured out, she shattered every expectation with a single televised moment that left the monarchy reeling. In November 1995, Diana sat under soft lighting across from journalist Martin Basher for BBC's Panorama, an interview that would leave an irreversible mark on British royal history. Calm and composed, she exposed a life crumbling behind palace walls. Her words didn't tremble. "There were 3 of us in this marriage," she said, referring to Camilla Parker Bowles, "so it was a bit crowded." That single line landed like a thunderclap. Not just a confession, but a reckoning. Diana went further than anyone thought possible. She peeled back the layers of royal perfection, speaking openly about her struggles with bulimia, postnatal depression, and self-harm. She described a world where she felt abandoned, unheard, and pushed to the edge. For the first time, a senior royal challenged the system from within, questioning not only her husband's loyalty, but also his ability to lead a nation. The monarchy was stunned, but the public listened, and they believed her. Yet the raw truth came wrapped in deception. Years later, it emerged that Bashir had secured the interview through forged documents and manipulation, feeding Diana's deepest fears about being spied on and betrayed. Lord Dyson's inquiry confirmed the journalist's deceit, sparking outrage that extended to Prince William himself. The fallout was swift. By December, the Queen sent letters urging both Charles and Diana to divorce. Charles agreed without hesitation. Diana, with her characteristic unpredictability, released her own statement first, catching the palace off guard. The scandal deepened when it was revealed Diana had accused Charles's assistant, Tiggy Legge-Burke, of an affair and a pregnancy termination, a claim she had reportedly relished repeating, though it was false and possibly seeded by Bashir. In August 1996, the divorce was finalized. Diana walked away with a £17 million settlement and joint custody of her sons, but lost the title of Her Royal Highness. The Queen, it said, wished for her to keep it, but Charles refused. Prince William, sensing the weight of her loss, made her a quiet promise. "Don't worry, Mummy. I will give it back to you one day." That interview didn't just change Diana's story. It rewrote how the world viewed royalty. She was no longer the silenced princess in a broken fairy tale. She became a symbol of truth, resilience, and defiance. A voice the crown could no longer control. Diana and Elton's unlikely bond. As the world reeled from the shockwaves of her interview, another quieter yet deeply personal chapter of Diana's life was unfolding. One shaped not by royalty, but by friendship. In a world governed by rules and restraint, it was Elton John who offered Diana something she rarely received behind palace walls: the freedom to simply be herself. Their connection sparked in 1981, not long after Diana stepped into the royal spotlight. At a royal birthday party where Elton was performing, he watched as the young princess entered the room with effortless charm and playful wit. They hit it off instantly, laughing over a mock Charleston as disco music thumped in the background. That night, a friendship was born, one rooted in shared fame, quick humor, and an unspoken understanding of life under scrutiny. Diana wasn't just another royal to Elton. She was hilarious, endlessly curious, and had a sharp eye for gossip. Whether trading laughs at dinner parties or quietly supporting each other through heartbreak, their bond ran deep. One evening, Diana found herself caught between actor Richard Gere and Sylvester Stallone in a not-so-subtle standoff. Yet she handled it with the same calm grace she carried into hospital wards when holding the hands of AIDS patients, challenging public fears with one simple gesture. Even the strongest friendships can crack. In 1997, a misunderstanding over a charity project created unexpected distance. Diana's formal note, "Dear Mr. John," left Elton John hurt in a way he hadn't anticipated. Their warm connection gave way to silence. But shortly after Gianni Versace's slaying, Diana picked up the phone. "I'm so sorry. It was a silly falling out," she said quietly. They laughed. They made plans. A reunion was on the horizon. Yet just as the door to reconciliation opened, tragedy was already closing in. But what private message was Diana sending beneath the silence? And why does it still echo today? Stay glued to your screen. Diana's death. By the time Diana's voice rang through televisions in her now infamous 1995 interview, the illusion of a quiet return to royal life was gone. That interview didn't just shake Buckingham Palace, it tore through its walls. Behind the scenes, Queen Elizabeth II responded swiftly, urging both Diana and Charles to finalize what had long become inevitable. Charles agreed without fuss. Diana, refusing to be sidelined, made her own announcement to the press, once again claiming the narrative for herself. Their divorce was finalized in August 1996. Though she gave up the style of Her Royal Highness, Diana kept her title as Princess of Wales, and, more importantly, her independence. No longer bound by royal duty, she stepped fully into her own power. Her work became her rebellion, comforting AIDS patients, walking through minefields, holding the hands no one else would. She didn't just visit charities, she gave them a voice, and the world leaned in to listen. But peace remained elusive. That summer in 1997, Diana found herself in the arms of Dodi Fayed, the son of billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed. The tabloids went wild. Their love story, still young and uncertain, was chased across the Mediterranean by a swarm of paparazzi. It was meant to be a private moment. Instead, it became her last. On the night of August 30th, Diana and Dodi left the Ritz Hotel in Paris, trying to lose the press trailing them at every turn. Minutes later, in the early hours of August 31st, their car slammed into a pillar inside the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Dodi and their driver, Henry Paul, died instantly. Diana was pulled from the wreckage, still alive, but not for long. By 4:00 a.m., the woman who once made the world believe in fairy tales was gone. The grief was immediate and global. On September 6, 1997, millions lined the streets of London, while billions more watched from home. But no television camera could soften the blow of seeing two young boys, William and Harry, walking behind their mother's coffin, heads bowed beneath the weight of a sorrow no child should carry. Conspiracy theories soon circulated. Some pointed fingers at British intelligence, others at the royal family itself. Mohammed Al Fayed insisted his son's death was no accident. But after years of investigations, a jury in 2008 concluded it had been a tragic case of unlawful slaying caused by a drunk driver and a ruthless press. Still, Diana's brother said it best that day at her funeral. She didn't need a royal title to shine. In the end, what made Diana unforgettable wasn't the crown. It was her courage, her kindness, and the quiet way she turned pain into purpose. The monarchy may have tried to quiet her, but the world refused to stop listening. The letter Elton never sent. And while the world mourned in unison, trying to grasp the enormity of what had been lost, one man grieved in silence, buried under the weight of things left unsaid. Elton John, whose bond with Diana had weathered glittering highs and crushing lows, didn't rush to the cameras or microphones. Behind the applause that followed his haunting rendition of Candle in the Wind, he was unraveling. In the days after her death, he did something few ever knew. Not to her family, not to the palace, not for the public, just for her. It wasn't filled with platitudes or performance. It was raw, messy, full of memories. His sorrow over a falling out that had once threatened to end their friendship, the guilt that they'd only just reconnected weeks before she died. He recalled how, after the slaying of Gianni Versace in July 1997, she had called unexpectedly. Her voice had softened. "I'm sorry. Let's not be foolish anymore." And just like that, the wall between them crumbled. They had laughed again. But time ran out far too quickly. Elton tucked the letter away, never sending it, never sharing it, just rereading it alone, again and again. In interviews years later, he confessed it felt like losing a sister. That letter had no address because its purpose was never closure. It was his way of holding on to a piece of her that no paparazzi could ever photograph. In the end, he sang for her before the world, but mourned her in quiet candlelight, pen in hand, tears on paper, saying goodbye the only way he knew how. Candlelight and Silence, Elton's last song for Diana. As the crowd's quiet mourning faded, Elton John retreated into a world no one else could see. One not filled with music or fame, but with raw loss. The night Diana died, Elton didn't hear it from the palace or the press. It was the whir of his fax machine that shattered the stillness. A message from a friend simply read, "So sorry to hear about this awful news." Confused, Elton turned on the television, and everything changed. Their last conversation still echoed in his mind. Weeks earlier, after a brief falling out, Diana had called to make peace. She had said, "Let's be friends again." And just like that, they were. But fate had no patience. Before they could meet again, she was gone. What followed wasn't a performance. It was a promise. On September 6, 1997, under the solemn arches of Westminster Abbey, Elton sat at a grand piano, his heart pounding, his voice trembling. Bernie Taupin had reimagined Candle in the Wind into a personal farewell. Goodbye, England's Rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. The world watched, but Elton wasn't there for them. He was there for her. For 4 minutes, he carried a nation's grief while suppressing his own. After Diana's funeral, there were no words, only the haunting image of 2 boys walking behind their mother's coffin. Elton John would later call that moment inhuman, and it haunted him. But his connection with Diana didn't end there. It transformed into a quiet vow to protect her memory and defend her children. In 2019, when Harry came under the same brutal media glare that once hounded his mother, Elton stood by him, calling it his responsibility as someone who had loved her truly. Because to Elton, Diana wasn't just a princess. She was the person who saw him, laughed with him, and called him in the silence. His final song wasn't just a tribute. It was his farewell. But what hidden grief did Elton carry into that final goodbye? And what untold truths still lie behind the music? Stay glued to your screen. The rift, the reconnection, and the unfinished goodbye. But behind the graceful piano tribute and that silent, aching farewell, there was a story that few ever heard, one that unfolded not on stage, but in private moments of confusion, pain, and quiet reconciliation. Earlier that year, 1997, long before the flowers piled at palace gates and the world held its breath for a funeral, something shifted between Diana and Elton. Without warning, she vanished from his life. Not physically, but emotionally. The calls stopped. Her warmth, once so freely given, turned cold. What arrived in its place was a sterile letter signed, "Dear Mr. John." Elton was stunned. There had been no falling out, no harsh words exchanged, just silence. It hurt more than he expected. Just months before, they had worked closely on a coffee table book for charity, a tribute to their friend Gianni Versace. Diana had promised to write the foreword, and Elton had thrown himself into the project with his usual passion. But then she pulled out. No explanation, just a short, detached message. That wasn't Diana. She wasn't someone who kept people at arm's length without cause. At first, Elton assumed it was stress. After all, Diana's life was never calm. But the more he sat with it, the more something darker crept into view. Had someone warned her off? Had the palace, growing uneasy with her bold independence, nudged her to cut ties with outspoken figures like him? Diana wasn't just a princess anymore. She was becoming something far more powerful. And that made some people nervous. It was only after Versace's shocking slaying in July that the silence broke. Elton picked up the phone, and there she was, soft-spoken, regretful. "I'm so sorry," she said. "It was a silly falling out. Let's be friends again." That call restored not just a friendship, but a deep emotional bond that had been bruised by forces neither of them fully controlled. They laughed. They made plans. But fate, cruel and unrelenting, gave them no more time. After Diana's death, Elton didn't simply mourn. He moved. While the world replayed his performance of Candle in the Wind, few realized what happened behind the scenes. He re-recorded the song, reshaped it as a memorial, and watched it become one of the best-selling singles in history. But the fame meant nothing to him. Every penny earned, over £30 million, went to charities Diana had once championed. This was his way of keeping her mission alive. More than that, he became her defender. Years later, when Prince Harry found himself under the same ruthless media spotlight that had once stalked his mother, Elton stood up for him, just as he once had for Diana. Not for attention, but out of loyalty. Because he had seen what the pressure could do. He had lived through it with her. And in every interview, every concert, every moment he spoke her name, Elton refused to let the world forget who she really was. Not a tragic figure frozen in history, but a bright, complex soul who tried to change the world, even when the world wasn't ready. Through him, Diana's voice still echoes, and perhaps always will. But what do you think made Diana suddenly retreat from Elton? Could it be a royal interference, hidden fears, or a deeper secret we'll never fully know? We'd like to hear your take in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.